19 years ago this week, on the July 8th, 2002 episode of Monday Night Raw, live from Philadelphia, an infamous show that gave us not only one of the more memorable injuries in history, but also one of the worst matches in WWE history. Kevin Nash, in his very first match back from the torn biceps he suffered months earlier, suffered his second major injury since re-signing with WWE 7 months earlier. He had wrestled a grand total of 6 matches up to this point on a contract that was said to be paying him $700,000 a year as a downside guarantee. On this night, he was part of a 10-man tag team main event, pitting Nash, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Big Show, and X-Pac against Booker T, Rob Van Dam, Goldust, Bubba Ray, and Spike Dudley. And many of the names I just mentioned had already wrestled in other matches, singles and tag team matches earlier in the night. So clearly they were very thin on roster depth at this time. Nash was not even supposed to be wrestling at all that night. He only found out once he got to the building that, Brian Gewirtz, who was, I think at that point he was the new, I don't know how new he would have been at that point, but he was the head writer. He gets to the building and finds out that Brian Gewirtz has decided to bump his return up a few days. He was going to be back at some of the live events later in the week. He gets to the building and says, "Hey, you're wrestling tonight." He didn't even have his gear with him. He had to have a friend go to his house to retrieve his gear and get it on a flight out so he can get to the building in time. He was very vocal backstage about being put in a match on such short notice with no time to prepare. He hadn't wrestled a match in months. He didn't even have his knee brace with him. If you watch the match back, the moment Nash tags in, he rubs his left knee. That was the leg that ended up getting hurt. He kind of it's like a 2-second thing, but he reaches down and he rubs his knee as if it was starting to cramp up or something. And then after delivering a big boot to Booker T, he tried to step over Booker to go to the corner to throw a forearm at Bubba Ray on the apron. And immediately he grabs his leg in agony and he crumbles to the mat. He is screaming in pain in a way that did not exactly project the badass aura that they were hoping for. He was screaming. And the match fell apart at that point. And everybody just started brawling. Shawn Michaels was on the outside. He started directing traffic as best he could. But Nash, he tore his quad. He tore his quad the way Triple H did, but he did not finish the match the way Triple H did, which was probably a smart thing for him to stay down. The Pro Wrestling Torch that week said that after the injury, Brian Gewirtz was said to be very quiet backstage. I'll bet he was. Vince McMahon was said to look shaken, probably because he realized he just lost one of his SummerSlam main events. I mean, the injury really screwed up their plans. The plan was for Nash to mow down all but one of his opponents in that match with big boots before hitting Booker T with the jackknife and pinning him. They wanted Nash to come across as a monster. And if you recall, in storyline, Kevin Nash and Shawn Michaels, they had a standing offer for Triple H to join the NWO at the Vengeance pay-per-view. And as I understand it, the plan would have been for Triple H to reject their offer, and that would have then led to a singles match at SummerSlam in 2002 between Triple H and Kevin Nash. And then the other big main event would be Rock and Brock, which ended up happening for the Undisputed title. Instead, this injury killed the NWO completely dead, once and for all, because you had Nash out, Scott Hall had already been fired, Hulk Hogan had already been turned babyface. So that left Shawn Michaels, Big Show, and X-Pac as the lone remaining members of the NWO, because they had already kicked out Booker T. The following week, Vince McMahon walked out on television. He officially disbanded the group, and with Nash out, Austin having already walked out on the company, Undertaker not really drawing very well on top as the champion, the pressure was on Shawn Michaels to return to the ring, which he did, and the rest is history. But to this day, you cannot go one comment thread anywhere on the internet, any comment thread, tweet thread, about Kevin Nash, you can't go one comment thread without there being at least one quad joke. But that same night, earlier in the show, featured a mixed tag team atrocity, pitting Bradshaw and Trish Stratus against Chris Nowinski and Tough Enough Season 2 co-winner Jackie Gata, who had absolutely no business being in the ring on live TV. She had only won Tough Enough a few weeks before this. And they thought it would be a smart idea to put her in the ring on live television on Monday Night Raw, 2 weeks later? It went about as well as you would have expected. This was the longest 3 minutes in Raw history. She was completely lost in there with Trish. They botched so many moves. I felt so bad for Trish. The finish was Trish Stratus coming off the ropes for what was supposed to be a bulldog. Trish did her part. She came off the ropes and landed on her ass. But Jackie didn't go down. She just stood there. And then all of a sudden, 2 seconds later, a delayed reaction. She sold it like an assassin's bullet had taken her out. Then she fell down. And she was the winner of Tough Enough. Imagine what the losers must have looked like. 16 years ago this week, on the July 11th, 2005 edition of Raw from East Rutherford, New Jersey, the old Meadowlands, Matt Hardy made his WWE return 3 months after being released by the company. While he was out with a knee injury, Matt found out that Lita, his girlfriend of 6 years, was cheating on him with Edge. And as if that wasn't bad enough, the guy is hurt, he's lost his girlfriend. WWE fires him due to unprofessional conduct in the way that he reacted to the situation online. The triple whammy. So he made a deal with Ring of Honor to work a date for them in July, but he was offered a deal by WWE to return. There was at least one, if not multiple, fan petitions online with thousands of signatures. People wanted Matt Hardy to be reinstated and get his job back. And he did, and the company heard, and they wanted to turn this very real-life situation into a television storyline and make money off of it, no matter how uncomfortable it may have been for the people involved. So they went to Matt with an offer to bring him back. And on this edition of Raw, he returned. He ambushed Edge, first in a backstage segment, and then again later in the ring before security swarmed him and cuffed him to take him out of the building. He called Lita a whore. He told the fans to come see him at Ring of Honor, where he wrestled that weekend before being hauled off. It was a well-done angle. It was a well-done angle playing off real-life events, but I still say when Vince McMahon brought him back to Raw a few weeks later and put a live mic in his hand, it was that promo that killed his push dead. Because that feud with Edge that came after that, the SummerSlam match and everything, that did him no favors whatsoever. And I think it goes back to that promo on the August 1st episode of Raw. I think that was Vince McMahon giving this guy a chance, giving him a live mic. All right, kid, let's see what you can do. It's not a terrible promo or anything. If you go back and watch it, it's about 8 or 9 minutes long. It's not a terrible promo, but he couldn't deliver it in a way, I think, a convincing way that it needed to be delivered. And I think what also worked against him, and I don't know if this was scripted for him or if he just came up with this on his own, but he lost the crowd near the end of that promo when he said the only thing that would make him happier than getting his hands on Edge was if he was killed in a car accident before he could get his hands on him. He actually said this. And you could hear a pin drop. The crowd did not know how to react to that. Even Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler on commentary, you can hear them. You can audibly hear them like cringing. It did not get like an ooh. It didn't get applause. It was like, oh my God. Like, I mean, that's a hell of a thing to say. But it didn't work. It just didn't work. And I really believe that was the night that ultimately killed him. I really do. 8 years ago this week, on the July 8th, 2013 episode of Monday Night Raw, the Wyatt Family made its main roster debut, being called up from NXT. After Kane's victory over Christian, they laid out Kane. God, has it really been 8 years? 8 years. Brody Lee is missed. And that early Bray Wyatt character, it was great. It really was. I went back and I was watching some of those original vignettes that were airing on TV that kind of built to the debut. That character was great. Days later, on July 11th, 2013, WWE officially opened its new Performance Center in Winter Park, Florida. This is the anniversary of the PC. What would they have done without the PC last year at the beginning of the pandemic era? They're very lucky to have that building, which I don't believe they own. I think they lease it, they rent it. I don't think they actually have ownership of it, but they are very lucky to have it. 6 years ago this week, on July 5th, 2015, Kazuchika Okada defeated AJ Styles in an outstanding match to reclaim the IWGP Championship at the New Japan Dominion show from Osaka. I can still remember the finishing sequence, the final 30 seconds of that match. Awesome. One of the very best matches of 2015. 5 years ago this week, on July 5th, 2016, Impact Wrestling presented the Final Deletion match from the Hardy compound between Matt and Jeff Hardy, which popularized the concept of cinematic-style matches, which is not to say that they had never been done before, but they had never been done like this. This was broken Matt Hardy at his peak. Dixie Carter had no idea what they planned on doing when they filmed this, but she had signed off on it anyway. And Matt was really the mastermind behind it. He had some help from his brother, and from Jeremy Borash, and even Billy Corgan. And 1 year ago this week, on July 8th, 2020, NXT presented Night 2 of its 2-week Great American Bash, featuring a champion against champion, title for title, winner-take-all main event, pitting NXT champion Adam Cole, baby, against North American champion Keith Lee. Cole had been NXT champion for 396 days coming into this show, or 403 days, as WWE recognizes it since this was a taped show. Didn't air for a few more days. Lee won the NXT championship that night, and it was a great moment that is very bittersweet, given how his career on the main roster has gone so far. On the anniversary of his win this week, Keith Lee tweeted, "Many of you are reminding me of this day a year ago. So much has happened since then, it feels so long ago. Patience, my friends. There is zero quit in me, so don't you quit on me. I miss you and I love you." Here's hoping we see the big man back in the ring soon. We may have a draft coming up soon at the end of August. It would be a nice surprise to see him pop up there. And that is this week in wrestling history.